Gon freaks will never be an enhancer again, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why, and all about the Nen monster he's becoming. Gon's new Nen type. Starting with the big thing that could radically shake up how Gon's powers even work, at this point he's lost all use of his Nen as a side effect of taking down Neferpitou. He used up all of his existing potential aura during that fight. Even with Nanika's healing, Gon's no longer awakened to Nen. He burned himself up. While Nanika's wish has given Gon a new lease on life, he's back to an early state prior to awakening. The life force he threw away has returned to him, but that instinctive command of aura is gone. But that's not necessarily the end of our young hunter's story. Gon isn't cursed in any way that would prevent him from ever using aura again. It's just as Jing said, he's returned to normal. He's back in the state he was in when the story began. He could awaken his Nen again just like he did before. However, if it were that simple, this restoration would run the risk of feeling narratively cheap. Gon went through a lot in the Chimera Ant arc. Even beyond that, he gave up everything with that full potential blast. Even with all that Killua went through to get him back, just letting Gon recover his Nen like nothing happened would feel shallow, lowering the impact of that moment. But there is potentially a compromise. What if, when he reawakens to his Nen, his proficiencies shift? All of that aura was spent in his last battle. Gon was tapped out. All the potential he had with his past path is gone. He gave up a whole life's worth of energy. There's no guarantee that the rejuvenated energy Nanika gave him will flow in the same way. He's back to square zero after all. Nen has always been influenced by personality, and with a traumatic event and his aura reset to zero, Gon may develop very differently this time around. How might his new Nen abilities be different? Well, Gon has demonstrated a strong command of multiple Nen types. JaJanken blends three together: enhancement, transmutation, and emission. That gives us two very different options for how Gon's Nen might develop, which could justify his abilities being very different in the future. Switching his power setup like this would be a nice compromise, narratively speaking. And this fits with what we know about how Gon's oath worked. He used up all of his potential as an enhancer in that one bout. Having to explore different ways of wielding his Nen would sidestep that. He would have to figure out how to get over his injury and get used to Nen again, as well as find a new way to use his powers. The whole process would echo the real-life physical therapy routines people who suffer injuries go through. Rather than returning to normal as if nothing had happened, he'd be working to adapt to and overcome the damage he'd sustained. But hey, drop a like to make Hunter x Hunter theories the norm on this channel. Transmuter Gon. This is clearly the best possible option for Gon. After all, it would put him in the same classification as Killua. Being a transmuter would not be that much of a shift from Gon's fighting style. Killua's already shown us how capable a transmuter can be in hand-to-hand combat. While they retain some of the sheer brute force of an enhancer, transmuters can apply their aura in more creative ways, making use of electricity or threads to accomplish creative feats. That's not really how Gon used this aspect of his Nen, however. He's traditionally been a bit more direct with it, making constructs directly out of his aura. That's how the scissors form of JaJanken works. It's very reminiscent of the Elder Zoldyx. Techniques like Silva's Aura Spheres or Zeno's Dragon Dive that focus on power. Those are just longer range techniques drawing more on emission, but perhaps Gon's version might get a bit more creative. Manipulation of his aura would allow Gon to form a variety of energy projections. While this option would lack the raw power Gon is known for, it'd enable him to become a lot more versatile in combat, always having the right tool for the job. Even out of combat, making constructs from aura like this would be extremely useful, shifting Gon's abilities more towards semi-conjuration. Imagine grapples that could pull Gon from point to point and walls that could offer battlefield control. There's a lot of potential with this. However, transmuters tend to see much sharper limits than this. Unlike conjurers, the things they manifest don't stick around. They're formed from energy. They're just here long enough to accomplish something specific. What's more, their abilities tend to be much more specific than what we've outlined here. We haven't met a transmuter who could make aura into anything they wanted. Just like every other Nen user, they'll usually have a specific technique that guides what they can do. In Gon's case, the most likely limitation on what he'd be able to use his aura for would come from JaJanken. Just as that took its form from a children's game, a Transmuter Gon might be able to manifest battle-ready versions of children's toys. He could form a yo-yo out of aura, even using it to grapple. He might be able to form a baseball bat due to its sporting connotations, but he couldn't just make a big gun or explosives. There is one other path that could potentially happen, however. A transmuter can affect their own form. That's how Biscuit keeps up her adorable facade. While Gon hasn't done this much, we saw it happen during his battle with Neferpitou. Taking this forward, perhaps Gon would perfect that ability. That adult Gon form was specific to that fight and doesn't fit with anything crucial to his personality, but there is a clear alternate option for a shapeshifting Gon to draw from. the animal kingdom. The story hasn't emphasized it in a long time, but Gon's always gotten along well with natural creatures. This is a kid who can take a clawing bear attack without flinching to try and comfort the creature. If he were to develop as a transmuter, taking on some beast-like characteristics might make a lot of sense. We haven't seen a transmuter fully shift into an animal before, but imagine more limited transformations. A clawed arm for fighting, a leg for jumping, and an eye for better sight. There's a lot of potential here. He could end up similar to the Chimera ants in that sense. But if you think all that's wild, you must not be subscribed to Plot Armor, because our next possibility is even crazier. Emitter Gon. This is a much more radical shift for Gon. While it's also an adjacent proficiency to enhancement, emission is all about separating your aura from yourself. Classically, this has been a weak spot for Gon, with paper estimated at 1/4 the strength of rock. Along this path, his past weaknesses would become his new strengths. This Gon would probably become more of a stealthy, agile fighter. He would count on Zetsu and En to stay hidden instead of going into a fight with a quick barrage of punches. We've seen that Gon has the skills to pull this off, however. He's been stealthy enough to elude Hisoka and grew up walking the woods. In some ways, this would be Gon returning to his roots rather than completely changing things up. The really fascinating thing, though, is how much this idea would pivot away from shonen norms. The genre is defined by main characters that are big, strong, and solve their problems by being strong and determined. While we've seen a few burly emitters like Silva Zoldyck, making Gon favor this proficiency could be a step towards turning him into a subverter of shonen norms. He'd be more of a guile hero, relying on deception to defeat his opponents, rather than confronting them directly. You know, like a hunter. Emission goes beyond blasting your opponents, though. It can definitely do that, but so can transmutation. The big difference between the two is that an emitter specializes in keeping aura separated from their body. These Nen users tend to be those who specialize in traps, potentially powerful abilities like paired destruction. In Gon's case, however, the most likely basis for an Emitter Gon to draw upon is his fishing rod. It's a visual representation of him casting his aura away from himself. Imagine simply being able to lay a mine down with a tap from his hook, or strengthening the line to better trip up his foes. He might even use emission and transmutation together to turn a patch of ground into water, which would let him fish for his opponents. Transmuter Gon or Emitter Gon? Which do you think is cooler? On second thought, just wait until you hear about this next possibility. Gon's new abilities. Let's put this idea of shifting proficiency aside, however. Whether Gon changes his overall Nen type or not, it seems likely that he'll try and develop some new abilities. Expanding outward is the best way to develop and grow, giving you more options in a fight rather than just hitting harder. Even as an enhancer, a variable arsenal of abilities is highly useful. It would let Gon fight with more creativity, something always useful against opponents who rely on pure physical strength. However, Gon being able to get any kind of new power is far from guaranteed. A vast majority of combatants in this world basically just have one ability. Specialists like Kurapika, who have a wide variety of unique techniques, are very much the exception. Even fighters like Chrollo and Hisoka technically have one core ability. They simply develop it in multiple ways, taking that core idea and working outward from it. Hisoka is an excellent example. His only real ability is bungee gum. If Gon is going to get another ability, we should start with the one he already has, JaJanken. Gon was able to adapt rock, paper, scissors into a form of combat. Why stop there? Nen is inherently personal, so that love of simple games is something Gon could expand outward. Kenkenpa or Hopscotch could help him boost his mobility. That might give us a short-range teleport, something akin to instant transmission. Bidama Marbles would provide him with an alternate emission-based attack, one more focused on knocking his opponents away than on dealing damage. Nawatobi Jump Rope would give him a new way to trip people up. That could fit neatly as a transmutation technique, just needing a short expenditure of aura before dematerializing. Then again, perhaps he's ultimately forced to start from scratch. With Gon's Nen gone for good, we no longer have any solid proof that JaJanken is still possible for him. Maybe everything Gon's been put through has left him with a darker mindset. While we've gone over some of the most likely possibilities, they're by no means exhaustive. A specialist Gon might be able to recreate some of the Greed Island rules in miniature form. A manipulator Gon might be able to force his opponents to fight honestly, avoiding dirty tricks or civilian casualties. Gon as a conjurer could mimic Kite's ability by conjuring his own weapon set. Nen bends to character, and right now Gon is still trying to decide who he wants to be. Once he does, we'll have a better sense of what his abilities might look like going forward. Gon's JaJanken potential. Let's turn this around. New Nen type and new abilities or not, Gon shouldn't have forgotten how to perform his signature move. JaJanken will likely still be in his arsenal, likely remaining as his signature move. Yet as cool as his rendition of rock, paper, scissors is, it's got some problems with it. As potent as JaJanken is, it's difficult for Gon to use in a fight. The charge-up is simply too long. The enemy will always have a chance to react before he completes the chant. Gon's gotten pretty good at dodging blows to let him make the attack regardless, but this is a consistent problem. If he's going to grow as a combatant, trying to find a better way to use this charging period should be a priority. The simplest option is for him to work more closely with his allies. Having someone else run interference gives Gon the perfect setup for his big attack. Killua's electricity generation is almost perfect for this, causing little damage but inflicting pain and diverting his enemy's attention. But that's not always going to be an option. When forced into a one-on-one fight, how could Gon reliably reach a point where he's able to make the call and deploy his signature move? Well, what about traps? We brought them up in this section on Emitter Gon, but maybe he doesn't need a whole new Nen type and specialized ability to create a trap. Simple tools can go a long way towards briefly incapacitating your enemies. Caltrops to the feet, a tripwire to pull them to the floor, even something as simple as a firecracker thrown behind them to create a loud noise. None of these tricks will turn the tide of battle on their own, but when you're trying to buy a few precious seconds to pull your ability off, they could make a massive difference. Even without physical props, Gon could adopt a more trap-oriented fighting style. We've already seen a taste of him trying to take this approach with his development of a more bluff-focused fighting style against Knuckle. Still, Gon hasn't really had time to perfect that technique just yet. With some instruction, he could develop to a point where his attacks help him set up JaJanken. Imagine a quick flurry of blows from Gon, not doing damage but forcing the opponent to back away and withdraw. That gives him time to make the JaJanken call. That even turns it into a strength. With an opponent at mid-range, Gon should have time to see how they react to the call, alternating between rock, scissors, and paper as appropriate. It's the perfect fork. Whatever choice they make, Gon will be able to respond. But all that is parallel development. These are just better ways of using the strength Gon already has. It begs the question, could Gon get even stronger? Could he push JaJanken beyond its current limits? And yes, he very much could. Gon's perfect JaJanken. There's an easy misconception about adult Gon. Given some of the lines said about him, a lot of people assume that this is Gon's total peak of power, something he could never surpass. This is how good he could get if he spent decades working out. The truth is a little more complicated. This is Gon's max aura output, the strongest he's ever managed to reach. In this state, he was capable of pushing an outstanding amount of raw power into his moves. But he lacked the knowledge and training of other legendary Nen users. His techniques weren't refined to their peak efficiency. We've already heard about how prone Gon is to wasting aura. Knuckle estimated his expenditure was at about 60% efficiency. For every 10 points of aura Gon spent, only 6 were applied to his blow. Adult Gon does not bypass that problem, he just generates way more raw power to get around it. And that opens up a path for Gon to grow stronger than this supposed peak. Strong enough to destroy Hisoka with ease even. More on that soon. Even if he never again manages to muster that much raw aura generation, greater control could give Gon more effective power. His JaJanken could grow even stronger than what we've seen. Imagine if he could achieve 1-to-1 aura efficiency, or even better, each piece of aura spent resonating like 2. We've got 2 existing examples of someone clearly perfecting their attacks through extensive training with their existing abilities. Xeno Zoldyck and Isaac Netero. Their feats are so grandiose that they feel like examples of this post 1-to-1 aura style, and we've seen some fighting from both old men. Can their ultimate techniques offer us any insight about Gon's further development? Netero spent many years perfecting his punch, ultimately defying physics itself with how quickly he delivers it. Gon's own JaJanken, as reliant as it is on charge time, could be reduced somewhat by this method. With enough training, Gon should be able to deliver it with a very limited charge-up. Quickly reciting that chant should be enough. The bigger question comes in multiplicity. That's something that both Xeno and Isaac demonstrate with their ultimate techniques. Silva's energy blasts were bigger than his father's dragons, but he could only manifest 2. Xeno drowned out the sky with a barrage of dragons during the palace raid. With training, Gon could potentially match this scope. Imagine if, instead of one blow, each rock caused a repeated, echoed impact. A sort of one-hit ora, if you will. But there is another approach to how training might help Gon perfect his move. Netero's 100-type Guanyin Bodhisattva was able to deliver blows with ridiculous speed. The Great Buddha echoed every strike Isaac himself made. Could we see a similar multiplicity from perfect JaJanken? Imagine a variant in which Gon manages to throw all 3 signs at once, for example. That might allow Gon to combine the 3 aspects of JaJanken into a single attack. The range of paper, the broad edge and cutting power of scissors, and the raw strength of rock. Training and dedication work wonders in this world. But just how high could Gon go? What could he accomplish with this sort of power? Gon vs Hisoka. So let's take a step back and look at this practically. What abilities would Gon need to take on Hisoka, for example? He's Gon's longest-standing antagonist and a powerful opponent. Even Chrollo, one of the mightiest Nen users in the world, couldn't permanently kill Hisoka. What would it take to bring him down? Transmuter Gon would have some advantages here. Being able to form blades from his aura would be advantageous against Bungee Gum. He could cut it more or less freely. Severing Hisoka's body parts would bypass the Bungee Gum resurrection. It relies on his body being mostly intact. The main question becomes if Gon can keep up with Hisoka for long enough to strike that final blow. If he's no longer able to utilize his enhancer-based physical boost as effectively, there will be more of a gap between them. He'd absolutely need some physical training to make sure he's able to keep up. Emitter Gon is in a more curious place due to Hisoka's final technique. With that Bungee Gum-powered resurrection, blunt trauma is going to be less effective against Hisoka, so explosions aren't going to be a good strategy. Any sort of impact can be simply bounced back. However, we've seen Gon's command of En and Zetsu is effective against the murderous magician. What's more, Chrollo's defeat of Hisoka utilized a very similar strategy. Focus on stealth and strike devastating hits when you can. A stealthy, trap-focused Gon is primed to follow in his footsteps. Outwitting Hisoka will be difficult, but it seems possible. If Gon is able to find a working restraint, it'd nullify the mobility Bungee Gum affords the Murder Hunter. Chrollo tried this in his fight with the dummies, but saw minimal success with it at first. With wisdom, Gon might make better use of this idea. And a regular Enhancer Gon who is able to remain largely unchanged from the way we saw him prior to the Palace Raid? It's a hard call. Hisoka's reserves of strength and Gon's enduring toughness are both excessive. Right now, the gap between them is more about their power level than any incompatibility in their talents. Both are strong. Both are tough. Hisoka likely retains an edge, but Gon is very familiar with how Bungee Gum works. If he's able to come up with a decent plan, it may not take him that much more training to stand a chance against the unkillable Hunter. But what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Jack Stansbury, and I hope you have an awesome day.